The sky above Seoul turned black at exactly 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. Commander Hyun-woo Kim was drinking coffee in his office when the shadows fell across the city like a massive blanket. He looked up through his window and saw them. Ships. Enormous ships that stretched from horizon to horizon. The vessels were beautiful in a terrible way. They gleamed like polished metal and moved without sound. No engines roared. No jets flamed. They simply existed in the sky as if they had always been there. Hyun-woo dropped his coffee cup. The ceramic shattered on the floor, but he did not hear it. He could only stare at the impossible sight above his city. His city that was no longer his. The radio on his desk crackled to life. Voices spoke in panic. Military bases around the world reported the same thing. The ships were everywhere. Above every major city. Above every military installation. Above every place where humans gathered in large numbers. Then, the ships spoke. The voice came from everywhere at once. From radios and televisions and smartphones. And computers. It spoke in every language perfectly. In Seoul it spoke Korean. In London it spoke English. In Cairo it spoke Arabic. The voice was calm and pleasant like a teacher speaking to children. "People of Earth," the voice said, "we are the Vexari Empire. We come in peace. Your world is now part of our great civilization. You will be safe. You will be fed. You will be given work that suits your abilities. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your species. Cooperation will result in prosperity for all." Hyun-woo reached for his phone to call his wife. The line was dead. He tried his radio. Static. He ran to the window and looked down at the street. People stood motionless, staring up at the sky. Cars had stopped in the middle of roads. Nothing moved except the alien ships high above. "Demonstration will now commence," the voice announced. Mount Fuji vanished. The mountain that had stood for thousands of years simply disappeared. Where solid rock and snow had existed moments before, there was now empty air. No explosion, no sound. The mountain was there and then it was not. The message was clear. Dr. So-young Park was in her laboratory at Seoul National University when the ships arrived. She had been studying samples from a meteorite when the world changed forever. Like everyone else, she heard the voice and saw the demonstration. Unlike everyone else, she immediately understood what it meant. The aliens possessed technology far beyond human capability. They could remove matter from existence without leaving a trace. They could communicate instantly across the entire planet. They could position massive ships in Earth's atmosphere without being detected until they chose to reveal themselves. Humanity had no chance of winning a war against such power. So-young was a practical woman. She had dedicated her life to understanding how life adapted to impossible conditions. Now she needed to understand how humanity might adapt to this impossible situation. She gathered her research materials and headed for her car. The roads were chaos, but she managed to reach her apartment. Her parents were there waiting for her. They had heard the announcement and came to be with family when the world ended. "What do we do now?" her mother asked. So-young looked out her window at the ships hanging in the sky like dark clouds. "We survive," she said. "We learn. We adapt." Engineer Jaemin Lee was working on a construction project in Busan when everything changed. He was inspecting the foundation of a new office building when his workers stopped working and pointed at the sky. The ships appeared so suddenly that Jaemin thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. Then came the voice and the demonstration. Mount Fuji disappeared and Jaemin felt his world shift beneath his feet. He had served in the military before becoming an engineer. He understood weapons and tactics and the reality of warfare. What he saw in the sky was not a military force. It was a cosmic disaster. The aliens were not here to fight. They were here to own. Jaemin dismissed his workers and drove home through streets filled with abandoned cars and confused people. His apartment felt small and fragile under the alien ships. He sat at his kitchen table and tried to think like an engineer. What were the problems? What were the solutions? Problem 1. The aliens possessed overwhelming technological superiority. Problem 2. They had demonstrated their willingness to use that technology for destruction. Problem 3. They wanted humans alive and working. The third point was interesting. The aliens needed something from humanity. They were not here to exterminate. They were here to utilize. That meant humans had value. That meant humans had leverage even if they did not know it yet. 3 days later, the aliens landed. The processing centers appeared overnight in every major city. They were smooth white buildings that seemed to grow from the ground rather than being constructed. Lines of people formed outside each center. The voice from the ships had been very clear about what would happen to those who did not report for processing. Hyunwoo stood in line outside the Seoul processing center with thousands of other people. The line moved quickly, too quickly. Each person spent only minutes inside before emerging changed. They walked differently. Their eyes looked different. They seemed calm in a way that was not natural. When Hyunwoo's turn came, he stepped through the white doors into a room filled with soft light. Creatures waited for him there. They were tall and thin with pale skin that seemed to glow. Their eyes were large and dark and completely without emotion. Commander Kim Hyunwoo, one of them, said without moving its mouth. The voice appeared directly in his mind. Former military officer, leadership experience, administrative capabilities. You will be assigned to governance duties in Sector 7. Something cold touched the back of Hyunwoo's neck. There was a brief, sharp pain, and then nothing. He felt a strange calm settle over his thoughts. The anger and fear that had filled him since the ships arrived began to fade. In their place came acceptance and a desire to serve efficiently. The Vexari were pleased with their new acquisition. Humans were proving to be excellent subjects. Their brain chemistry responded well to the neural implants. Their social structures adapted quickly to Vexari oversight. Their physical capabilities made them suitable for a wide variety of tasks. Within 1 month, Earth had been fully integrated into the Vexari Empire. Humans reported to work assignments with perfect compliance. Production quotas were met ahead of schedule. Resistance had been virtually eliminated through the simple application of proven technology. The Vexari had conquered thousands of worlds using the same methods. Neural implants suppressed aggressive tendencies while enhancing cooperation and productivity. Physical demonstrations of power eliminated hope of successful rebellion. Efficient sorting systems placed each individual in roles that maximized their utility to the empire. Humans were following the same pattern as every other species. The Vexari monitors reported complete success. But something was wrong. So Young felt it first during her 3rd week at the Xenobiology Research Station, where she had been assigned. The neural implant made her want to obey Vexari instructions and focus only on assigned tasks. But sometimes when she was alone in the laboratory late at night, she found herself thinking about things she was not supposed to consider. She wondered about the implant's design. She questioned why certain research topics were forbidden. She felt curious about Vexari technology in ways that should have been impossible. The implant was working. She felt the calm compliance it was supposed to provide. But underneath that artificial serenity, something else stirred, something the Vexari had not anticipated. Jae-min experienced similar moments at the mining station where he had been sent. The work was hard, but the implant made him accept it without complaint. Yet sometimes, while operating the heavy machinery, he found himself studying the equipment more carefully than necessary. He noticed design flaws that could be improved. He imagined modifications that could increase efficiency. The implant told him to follow orders and not think beyond his assigned duties. But his mind kept working anyway. Hyunwoo's awakening came during his 4th week in the administrative center. He was processing reports about human productivity when he realized he was memorizing information that had nothing to do with his work. Details about Vexari communication protocols, schedules for supply shipments, security procedures for sensitive facilities. The implant should have prevented such behavior. He should have been focused only on completing his assigned tasks efficiently. Instead, he found himself building a comprehensive understanding of how the Vexari controlled human society. None of them understood what was happening. The neural implants were functioning exactly as designed, but human brains were more complex than the Vexari had anticipated. The technology that had worked perfectly on thousands of other species created unexpected effects in human neural chemistry. Rather than complete suppression of independent thought, the implants created a strange duality. Humans appeared perfectly compliant on the surface while deeper mental processes continued to operate freely. The Vexari monitoring systems detected only the surface compliance. Humanity was learning to think while appearing not to think. The Vexari Empire had created the perfect servants, but they had made one critical error. They had assumed that perfection meant complete control. They were about to discover how wrong they were. 6 months had passed since the ships arrived. The world looked different now. Vexari buildings stood beside human structures like strange white growths. The aliens had not destroyed human cities, but they had changed them. Everything was cleaner. Everything was more organized. Everything was under control. Commander Hyunwoo Kim walked through the administrative complex in Seoul every morning at exactly 7 o'clock. His neural implant made him want to maintain perfect punctuality. But as he walked, he also memorized the guard schedules. He counted the number of Vexari supervisors on each floor. He noted which doors remained locked and which areas were off limits to humans. The implant told him to focus only on his assigned duties. Process reports. Manage human work assignments. Ensure compliance with Vexari regulations. But his mind kept working on problems the implant was supposed to prevent him from considering. How did Vexari communication systems work? Where did they store their most sensitive information? What would happen if those systems failed? Hyunwoo did not understand why he could think these thoughts. The other humans in his department seemed completely focused on their work. They showed no curiosity about anything beyond their immediate tasks. They smiled when spoken to and obeyed every instruction without question, but sometimes he caught them looking at things they should not notice. A security camera with a damaged lens, a computer terminal left unlocked, a conversation between Vexari supervisors conducted in their own language. The looks lasted only seconds. Then the humans would return to their work as if nothing had happened. But Hyunwoo began to suspect that he was not the only one experiencing these strange moments of awareness. Dr. So-Young Park worked in Laboratory 7 at the Xenobiology Research Station. The Vexari had assigned her to study human genetic patterns. They wanted to understand how different populations might respond to various forms of neural conditioning. It was important work for the Empire's continued expansion. So-Young performed her assigned tasks efficiently. She collected samples and ran tests and compiled reports exactly as instructed. The neural implant made her want to please her supervisors and complete every assignment perfectly. But late at night, when the laboratory was empty, she found herself conducting different experiments. She studied the neural implants themselves. She analyzed tissue samples from the implantation sites. She compared brain scans from before and after the procedure. What she discovered should have been impossible according to Vexari science. The implants were working exactly as designed. They suppressed aggressive behavior and enhanced compliance. They made humans want to serve the Empire willingly. But human brain chemistry was more complex than the Vexari had anticipated. The implants created feedback loops in the neural pathways they were supposed to control. Instead of complete suppression, they caused a splitting effect. Part of the human mind accepted the implant's influence completely, but other parts continued to function independently. So-Young realized that humans were developing a form of mental camouflage. They appeared perfectly controlled on the surface while deeper cognitive processes remained free. The Vexari monitoring equipment could only detect the surface layer. She began to document her findings in a secret file hidden within routine genetic research data. If she was right, then humans were not as helpless as they appeared. But she needed to find others who were experiencing the same awakening. Engineer Jae-min Lee operated heavy mining equipment on Asteroid Station 47 in the Kepler system. The work was dangerous and exhausting, but the neural implant made him accept the conditions without complaint. He extracted rare minerals that the Vexari Empire needed for their technology. The station held 3,000 human workers and 50 Vexari supervisors. The humans lived in cramped quarters and worked 12-hour shifts. The supervisors lived in comfortable sections with artificial gravity and climate control. Jaemin's implant made him want to work efficiently and follow all safety protocols. But during his off hours, he found himself studying the station's design. He memorized the locations of power systems and life support equipment. He analyzed the construction of the mining equipment and identified potential modifications. The modifications were not improvements to help the Vexari. They were changes that could turn mining tools into weapons. Jamin did not consciously plan to build weapons. The implant would have prevented such thoughts. But his engineering mind automatically solved problems and optimized systems. When he looked at mining lasers, he saw how they could be reconfigured to cut through station walls. When he examined transport vehicles, he noticed how they could be modified to carry more than ore. Other workers on the station were experiencing similar moments of clarity. They had developed a subtle form of communication that the Vexari did not recognize. A tap on a tool meant danger. A gesture during shift change indicated an area to avoid. A pattern of movements while working conveyed complex information. The supervisors saw only efficient human laborers performing their assigned tasks. They did not realize that the humans were also building a network of shared knowledge and mutual support. Mira Choi had been a communications officer in the Korean Navy before the invasion. Now she worked at Communication Hub 12 monitoring message traffic between Vexari installations. Her job was to identify and report any signs of human resistance activity. The neural implant made her want to serve the Empire faithfully. She read every message carefully and flagged anything that might indicate unauthorized human communication. But she also began to understand how Vexari systems worked. Their technology was advanced, but it followed predictable patterns. Messages were routed through specific relay stations. Encryption used mathematical formulas that could be analyzed and understood. Security protocols had logical weaknesses that could be exploited. Myra started making small modifications to the monitoring software. Changes so subtle that the Vexari supervisors did not notice them. She created hidden pathways through the communication network that would allow messages to pass undetected. She did not yet know who might use these pathways, but she sensed that other humans were experiencing the same awakening she felt. When they were ready to communicate, they would need secure channels. The first contact came during Mira's 8th month at the hub. A brief message appeared in one of her hidden channels. It contained only coordinates and a time. Nothing more. Mira felt her heart race despite the calming effects of her implant. Someone else was awake. Someone else was thinking beyond their assigned duties. Someone else was ready to take the next step. The coordinates led to an abandoned section of the Seoul subway system. Mira arrived at the specified time and found 12 other humans waiting in the darkness. They stood in a circle, speaking in whispers. "We all feel it," one of them said. "The implants work, but they do not work completely." "I can think about things I should not think about," another added. "I remember skills they tried to erase." Mira stepped forward. "I can create secure communication channels," she said. "We can talk to others like us." Hyunwoo emerged from the shadows. "I have access to administrative systems. I know where they keep sensitive information." So Young appeared beside him. "I understand how the implants work. I know why we can resist them." More humans stepped forward. Engineers and scientists and teachers and soldiers. All of them experiencing the same phenomenon. All of them maintaining the appearance of perfect compliance while secretly building something new. They called themselves the Quiet Ones because they made no noise that the Vexari could hear. They met in abandoned places and communicated through hidden channels. They shared information and resources and hope. The Vexari monitors reported no signs of organized resistance. Human productivity remained high. Compliance rates stayed at optimal levels. The neural implants continued to function within acceptable parameters. But deep beneath the surface, something was growing. A network of awakened minds learning to work together. People who appeared to be perfect servants but were actually becoming something the Vexari had never encountered before. The Empire had conquered thousands of worlds using the same methods. Neural conditioning had never failed before, but they had never tried to control a species quite like humanity. Humans were proving to be uniquely suited to the art of hidden rebellion. They could smile and obey while secretly planning. They could work efficiently while quietly sabotaging. They could appear completely loyal while building the foundation of revolution. The Vexari believed they had created the perfect servants. But perfection had a flaw they had not anticipated. Perfect servants who could think for themselves were not servants at all. They were something much more dangerous. The quiet ones were learning to be very quiet indeed. But they were also learning to listen. And what they heard in the silence between official communications was the sound of an empire that had made a critical mistake. They had given humans time to adapt, and humanity was very good at adaptation. 1 year after the ships arrived, the human resistance had become something unprecedented in galactic history. They called it the Quiet Revolution because it made no sound the Vexari could hear. But beneath the surface of compliance, an entire shadow civilization was growing. Commander Hyunwoo Kim had learned to walk through the administrative complex like a perfect servant. His posture showed submission. His face displayed appropriate respect when Vexari supervisors passed by. His work performance remained exemplary according to all official metrics, but in his mind he carried detailed maps of every Vexari installation on Earth. He knew which facilities held the most important equipment. He understood how their security systems operated. He had identified the key personnel whose removal would cause maximum disruption to their operations. The resistance had placed people in positions throughout the occupation government. Human collaborators who appeared completely loyal while secretly feeding information to the quiet ones. They held middle management positions that the Vexari considered too unimportant to monitor closely. These positions gave them access to transportation, schedules and resource allocations and personnel assignments. Information that seemed routine, but was actually invaluable for planning operations the Vexari would never see coming. Hyunwoo's latest assignment involved coordinating work crews for a new mining project in Africa. The Vexari wanted to extract rare minerals from deposits deep underground. They needed human workers who could operate in dangerous conditions that their own people preferred to avoid. What the aliens did not know was that Hyunwoo was selecting specific individuals for the work crews: engineers who understood explosives, former military personnel with combat experience, communications specialists who could establish secure networks. The mining project would provide the resistance with trained personnel in a remote location, far from major Vexari surveillance systems. It would also give them access to materials that could be used for purposes other than mining. Dr. So-Young Park had made breakthrough discoveries about human neural adaptation. Her research showed that prolonged exposure to the Vexari implants was causing unexpected evolutionary changes in human brain chemistry. The implants were designed to suppress independent thought and enhance compliance. But human neural pathways were remarkably flexible. Over time, they developed new connections that bypassed the implant's control mechanisms. The effect was strongest in individuals who had been exposed to high stress or complex problem-solving situations before receiving their implants: military personnel, scientists, engineers, teachers, people whose brains had been trained to think in multiple dimensions. These individuals were developing what So-Young called cognitive bifurcation, one layer of consciousness that responded normally to implant conditioning, and another layer that remained completely free. The two layers could operate simultaneously without interfering with each other. Even more interesting was So-Young's discovery that this adaptation could be enhanced through specific types of mental exercises, meditation techniques that strengthened the connection between the free and controlled layers, visualization practices that improved cognitive camouflage abilities. She began teaching these techniques to other members of the resistance. The training spread through their hidden networks. Like a beneficial virus, humans across the empire started developing stronger resistance to neural conditioning. But So-Young's most important breakthrough came when she learned how to modify the implants themselves. Using equipment in her laboratory, she developed a procedure that could reverse the implant's primary functions. Instead of suppressing human independence, it could suppress Vexari monitoring capabilities. Modified implants would make humans invisible to alien surveillance systems while maintaining the appearance of normal function. The Vexari would see compliant, servants while humans regained complete mental freedom. The modification procedure was complex and dangerous. It required precise surgical techniques and specialized equipment. But once perfected, it could be performed in secret medical facilities throughout human space. Engineer Jamin Lee had transformed his mining operation into something the Vexari supervisors could never have imagined. What appeared to be a standard mineral extraction facility was actually a sophisticated weapons manufacturing complex. The human workers used mining equipment to extract raw materials for construction projects the aliens never authorized. They processed metals and ceramics and electronic components using Vexari technology for purposes far beyond the original specifications. In hidden chambers carved deep into asteroid rock, the workers assembled devices that looked like mining tools, but functioned as military hardware. Cutting lasers became directed energy weapons. Transport vehicles became armored personnel carriers. Communication equipment became secure command and control systems. The beauty of the operation was its invisibility. All materials came from legitimate mining activities. All equipment was standard Vexari technology. All work appeared to support authorized production quotas. The supervisors saw human workers extracting valuable minerals on schedule and meeting all efficiency targets. They had no reason to investigate further. The reports they sent to their superiors showed a model operation that exceeded expectations, but hidden beneath the surface, Jamin and his teams were building the tools of liberation. Weapons that could cut through Vexari armor. Vehicles that could transport resistance fighters across hostile terrain. Communication systems that could coordinate operations across multiple star systems. They were also constructing something even more ambitious. Using Vexari ship designs and manufacturing techniques, they were building humanity's first interstellar warships. The vessels were disguised as mining equipment and ore processors, but they incorporated advanced weapons and defensive systems. The construction took place in sections scattered across different asteroids. Individual components looked like routine mining infrastructure, but when assembled, they would form spacecraft capable of challenging Vexari military superiority. Taiho Nam had been a high school teacher before the invasion. Now he worked in Education Facility 19, preparing human children for integration into Vexari society. His job was to teach them basic skills while ensuring they developed appropriate attitudes of submission and service. The neural implants were not used on children under 16. The Vexari had learned that developing brains responded poorly to the technology. Instead, they relied on educational conditioning to shape young minds into acceptable patterns. But Taiho was teaching lessons the Vexari never approved. Mixed in with mathematics and language instruction were lessons about strategy and tactics. Hidden within history courses were detailed analyses of successful resistance movements. Embedded in science classes were explanations of alien technology and its vulnerabilities. The children appeared to be model students. They scored well on official assessments and displayed appropriate respect for their alien overseers. But they were also learning skills and knowledge that would make them formidable opponents when they came of age. These children had been born after the occupation. They had never known freedom, but they were learning what it meant. They understood both human potential and Vexari weaknesses in ways their parents could barely imagine. Taiho established underground schools that met in abandoned buildings and forgotten tunnels. Advanced students taught younger children. Knowledge flowed through networks that the Vexari monitoring systems never detected. The most promising students received special training in cognitive camouflage techniques. They learned to think revolutionary thoughts while maintaining the appearance of perfect compliance. Some showed abilities that surpassed even the most skilled adult resistance members. Young Hee Seo was 15 years old and already a master of mental deception. She could discuss sabotage techniques with her resistance cell while simultaneously writing essays about loyalty to the Vexari Empire. Her implant-free brain could compartmentalize information in ways that amazed trained adults. She and others, like her, represented the future of human resistance, a generation that had grown up under occupation but refused to accept it as permanent. Children who understood alien technology better than their conquerors realized. Communication between resistance cells had evolved into a sophisticated network that spanned hundreds of worlds. Mira Choi had become the primary architect of what they called the Whisper Web, hidden pathways through Vexari communication systems that allowed instant coordination across vast distances. The network used mathematical principles that the aliens had developed but never fully understood. Human mathematicians and cryptographers had discovered weaknesses in Vexari encryption that created opportunities for undetectable message transmission. Each major population center had at least one communication hub operated by resistance members with legitimate access to alien systems. These operators could relay messages between cells without leaving traces that Vexari security could follow. The Whisper Web carried intelligence reports and tactical plans and resource requests. It also carried something more important: hope. Humans across the Empire learned they were not alone. The resistance was not a few isolated groups, but a galaxy-spanning movement that included millions of people. Factory workers on distant worlds and minor. 2 years had passed since the conquest, and the Vexari Empire faced its first serious challenge in 1,000 years. They did not realize it yet, but their greatest victory was becoming their greatest defeat. The humans they considered their most successful integration were actually preparing the largest coordinated rebellion in galactic history. Commander Hyunwoo Kim walked through the halls of the Central Administrative Complex with perfect posture and appropriate deference. To any observer, he appeared to be exactly what Vexari wanted him to be: a compliant human administrator who processed reports and managed workflows with quiet efficiency. But in his mind, he carried something that would have terrified his alien supervisors: complete intelligence maps of every major Vexari installation in human space. Guard rotations and security protocols and communication frequencies and structural vulnerabilities. 2 years of careful observation had created the most detailed analysis alien military infrastructure that any resistance movement had ever possessed. The information came from thousands of sources: human workers in maintenance positions who memorized facility layouts, technicians who understood alien equipment better than their supervisors realized, administrators like himself who had access to classified systems and the mental discipline to remember everything while appearing to notice nothing. Today he was reviewing personnel assignments for the new industrial complex being built in what had once been the Amazon rainforest. The Vexari needed the facility to process materials for their expanding fleet construction program. They were preparing for campaigns against species that had not yet encountered the Empire. What they did not know was that Hyunwoo was selecting specific humans for key positions throughout the complex. Engineers who understood sabotage techniques, former military officers with combat experience, communication specialists who could establish secure networks when the time came for action. The facility would become another node in the resistance network, a place where humans could gather resources and train personnel while maintaining the appearance of loyal service to the Empire. Hyunwoo's latest intelligence indicated that similar preparations were underway across hundreds of worlds. The resistance had evolved far beyond isolated cells conducting small operations. They had become a shadow government that existed within every level of the occupation hierarchy. Dr. So Young Park had completed development of what she called the Liberation Protocol. Her research had shown that the modified neural implants could do more than just free humans from Vexari control. They could actually turn alien technology against its creators. The Liberation Protocol worked by exploiting fundamental weaknesses in Vexari system architecture. Their technology relied on hierarchical control structures that assumed complete loyalty from all users. They had never designed safeguards against users who appeared loyal, but were actually hostile. A human with a modified implant could access Vexari networks and equipment while appearing to be a normal authorized user. The alien monitoring systems would detect only routine activity, while the human downloaded classified information or introduced disruptive programming. Even more dangerous from the Vexari perspective was the protocol's ability to spread through their networks like a virus. One modified human could infect alien systems and create access points for other resistance members. The infection could cascade through entire installations before anyone realized what was happening. So Young had begun mass production of the modification equipment in secret medical facilities across human space. The procedures were performed by doctors who had volunteered for the resistance. Each modified human became a potential access point into Vexari systems. The aliens had no idea that their own technology was being systematically compromised by the people they considered their most obedient servants. Security reports continued to show normal activity levels and acceptable compliance rates. But deep within their networks, invisible changes were taking place. Backdoors were being created. Monitoring systems were being blinded. Weapon systems were being quietly reprogrammed to respond to human commands rather than alien ones. Engineer Jae-min Lee stood in the control center of Mining Station 47 and marveled at what they had accomplished. What appeared to be a routine mineral extraction facility was actually the most sophisticated weapons manufacturing complex in the galaxy. The human workers had used Vexari technology and materials to build an entire fleet of warships. Vessels that incorporated the best of alien engineering with innovations the Empire had never imagined. The ships were hidden in hollowed-out asteroids throughout the system, disguised as ore processing facilities and storage depots. The construction had taken 18 months of careful work. Every component had to be manufactured using equipment that officially existed for other purposes. Every material had to be obtained through legitimate mining operations. Every worker had to maintain the appearance of loyal service while actually participating in the greatest act of rebellion the galaxy had ever seen. The Vexari supervisors reviewed production reports that showed exceptional efficiency and resource utilization. They praised the human workers for exceeding all expectations. They sent commendations to their superiors about the success of the mining operation. They had no idea that their model facility was actually a military shipyard that had just completed construction of humanity's first interstellar battle fleet. Jae-min activated a secure communication channel and sent a coded message through the resistance network. "The tools are ready," he transmitted. Awaiting instructions for distribution. Similar messages were being sent from manufacturing facilities throughout human space. Weapons and vehicles and communication equipment had been built in secret using alien resources and technology. The Resistance had equipped itself with tools that matched or exceeded anything in the Vexari arsenal. But the most impressive achievement was not the weapons themselves, but the logistics network that would distribute them. Hidden supply lines that could move equipment across multiple star systems without detection. Storage facilities that appeared to contain routine supplies but actually held military hardware. Transportation systems that could deliver weapons to resistance cells throughout the galaxy within hours of receiving activation orders. Young Sik Han had been a fighter pilot in the Korean Air Force before the invasion. Now he worked as a transport operator moving cargo between Vexari installations. His flying skills were considered useful for routine logistics operations. What the aliens did not realize was that young Sik was training the next generation of human spacefighters. Pilots, who understood both human tactics and alien technology, men and women who had grown up under occupation and possessed a burning desire to reclaim their freedom. The training took place during routine cargo flights between installations. Student pilots learned to operate Vexari vehicles while appearing to perform standard transportation duties. They mastered combat maneuvers disguised as navigation exercises. They practiced weapon systems operations that looked like routine maintenance procedures. These pilots had advantages that no previous generation of human fighters had possessed. They understood alien psychology and technology from years of forced cooperation. They knew the weaknesses and blind spots in Vexari equipment. They had studied enemy tactics and developed countermeasures. Most importantly, they fought with the desperation of people who had nothing left to lose. They had watched their world be conquered and their people enslaved. They carried the anger and determination of an entire species that refused to accept defeat. The Resistance pilot training program had produced over 10,000 qualified combat operators across human space, each one capable of flying alien spacecraft better than their original designers had intended. Each one ready to turn transportation vehicles into weapons of liberation when the signal came. Young Sik received confirmation that the hidden fleet was ready for deployment. Warships disguised as mining equipment throughout the galaxy awaiting orders to reveal their true nature. Support vessels that could carry troops and supplies for extended operations. communication ships that could coordinate attacks across multiple star systems simultaneously. The greatest military force in human history was hiding in plain sight throughout Vexari space. An armada that had been built using alien resources and operated by pilots trained on alien equipment. When the time came for action, the Empire would face enemies who understood their technology better than they understood themselves. The first test came when a Vexari patrol ship investigating routine equipment malfunctions at Mining Station 47 simply vanished. The official report listed the incident as a mechanical failure that resulted in the vessel being destroyed by unstable asteroid debris. In reality, the patrol ship had been captured by resistance forces who turned its own weapons against it. The crew was taken prisoner, and their vessel was added to the human fleet. The entire operation took less than 10 minutes and left no trace that the Vexari could follow. Similar incidents began occurring throughout human space. Patrol vessels disappearing during routine inspections, supply ships failing to arrive at their destinations. Communication relays experiencing unexplained malfunctions that created blind spots in Vexari surveillance networks. Each incident appeared to be an ISO. The day of liberation began like any other day in the Vexari Empire. Across hundreds of worlds, human workers reported to their assignments with the same quiet compliance they had shown for over 2 years. The aliens who supervised them noticed nothing unusual. Production quotas were being met. Efficiency ratings remained high. The neural implants continued to function within acceptable parameters. What the Vexari did not realize was that they were watching the most complex military operation in galactic history unfold before their eyes. What appeared to be routine maintenance and standard work procedures was actually the synchronized execution of a plan that would destroy their empire within hours. Commander Hyun-Woo Kim walked through the Central Administrative Complex in Seoul at exactly 7 o'clock in the morning. He carried no weapons, he displayed no signs of hostility. He greeted the Vexari supervisors with appropriate respect and began processing the morning reports with his usual efficiency. But at 7:15, he received a message through the hidden communication network. A single word that had been waiting for this moment for over a year. Sunrise. The Liberation Protocol activated across human space like a wave of light expanding at the speed of thought. In administrative centers and mining facilities and research stations and communication hubs, humans who had appeared to be model servants suddenly revealed their true nature. Hyun-Woo's hands moved across his computer terminal with practiced precision. But instead of processing routine reports, he was uploading programs that would cascade through every Vexari system on Earth. The Liberation Protocol spread through their networks like a virus, shutting down security systems and locking alien personnel inside their own facilities. The Vexari supervisor who shared Hyun-Woo's office looked up from his workstation with confusion. "The communication system is malfunctioning," he said. "I cannot reach the central command." Hyun-Woo smiled. "For the first time in 2 years. That is because there is no central command anymore," he replied. "There is only us." Dr. So-Young Park stood in Laboratory 7 as the Liberation Protocol took control of the Xenobiology Research Station. Around her, other human workers were removing equipment and files that would be useful for the Resistance. The Vexari scientists who had supervised them for months tried desperately to access their systems, but found only error messages and locked terminals. "What is happening?" one of the aliens demanded. "Why are the systems not responding?" So-Young walked over to the supervisor who had assigned her research projects and monitored her work for over a year. The alien was tall and pale with large, dark eyes that had never shown any emotion. Now those eyes showed fear. "You made one critical mistake," So-Young explained. "You assumed that neural implants would make us into perfect servants. But perfect servants who can think for themselves are not servants at all. They are revolutionaries waiting for the right moment to act." The modified implants throughout the facility activated simultaneously. Every piece of Vexari equipment that had been subtly reprogrammed over months of secret work began responding to human commands instead of alien ones. Doors sealed shut, trapping supervisors in their offices. Communication systems switched to resistance frequencies. Weapon systems turned toward their former masters. Engineer Jamin Lee stood in the command center of Mining Station 47 as the disguised warships throughout the asteroid field revealed their true nature. Ore processors opened like flowers to expose weapon batteries. Mining equipment transformed into military vehicles. Communication arrays that had carried routine messages for 2 years suddenly began broadcasting battle coordination signals across the galaxy. The Vexari supervisors watched in horror as their model mining facility became a military base. The human workers they had praised for their efficiency were now revealed as trained soldiers who understood alien technology better than its creators. "This is impossible," the station commander said. "The neural conditioning prevents organized resistance. The monitoring systems would have detected any unauthorized activity." Jamin activated the main display screen to show the positions of human warships throughout the system. Dozens of vessels that had been hidden as mining equipment were now forming into battle formations. "Your monitoring system saw exactly what we wanted them to see," he explained. "We learned to think like you while remaining human. That combination is something your empire has never encountered before." The first Vexari patrol ships to respond to the uprising found themselves facing opponents who knew their tactics and technology better than they knew themselves. Human pilots flying modified alien vessels used the Empire's own weapons against them. The battles were brief and decisive. Young Sik Han led a squadron of fighters that had been disguised as cargo transports. The pilots under his command had trained for this moment during thousands of routine flights between installations. They knew every weakness in Vexari ship design and every flaw in alien defensive systems. The enemy vessels they encountered were operated by crews who had never faced serious opposition. For 1,000 years, the Vexari had conquered through overwhelming technological superiority. They had never needed to develop advanced combat tactics or innovative strategies, but the humans attacking them had grown up studying warfare and developing countermeasures. They fought with the desperate creativity of people who had spent years planning for this single opportunity to strike back at their oppressors. Young Sik's squadron destroyed an entire patrol group in less than 5 minutes. The Vexari ships were more advanced, but their crews could not adapt to unexpected tactics. They followed standard procedures that the humans had studied and prepared for. "This is Fighter Leader 1 to all resistance units," Young Sik broadcast on the secure channel. "The sky belongs to us now." Communications Officer Mira Choi watched from the primary relay station as the Vexari communication network collapsed under the assault of the Liberation Protocol. Systems that had operated flawlessly for centuries were failing as human-introduced programs spread through their infrastructure. The aliens had designed their technology to be completely secure against external attacks, but they had never considered the possibility of attacks from within their own systems. Human technicians with legitimate access and modified neural implants were introducing chaos into networks that had no defense against authorized users with hostile intentions. Emergency signals from Vexari installations throughout human space flooded the surviving communication channels. Reports of system failures and equipment malfunctions and personnel being trapped in sealed facilities. But the messages could not reach Central Command because the relay systems had been compromised. Myra activated the Resistance broadcast network that had been hidden within the Vexari communication infrastructure for over a year. Suddenly, every screen and speaker throughout human space began transmitting the same message. "People of Earth and the human colonies," the voice announced. "This is the Human Liberation Command. The Vexari occupation is ending. Your freedom is beginning. Report to designated rally points for further instructions." The voice was calm and professional, but carried an undertone of fierce determination. It was the voice of a species that had been enslaved for 2 years and was finally breaking free. Teacher Taiho Nam led his students out of Education Facility 19 as resistance fighters secured the building. The children who had learned secret lessons about strategy and tactics while appearing to study. Approved subjects now demonstrated skills that amazed their former captors. 15-year-old Young Hee Seo walked up to the Vexari education supervisor who had monitored her progress for months. The alien had praised her essays about loyalty to the Empire and her perfect compliance scores. "You taught us well," Young Hee said to the confused supervisor. You showed us how your systems work, how your technology operates, how your hierarchy functions. We learned everything you wanted us to learn, but we also learned things you never intended to teach. She gestured toward the other students who were helping resistance fighters download files from the facility's computers. You thought we were children being prepared for service, but we were actually intelligence operatives gathering information about our enemies. The Vexari supervisor stared at the young human in disbelief. The conditioning should have prevented independent thought. You should not be capable of deception. Young He smiled. We are human. Deception and adaptation are what we do best. Your neural implants work perfectly on adults whose minds are already fully formed. But children's brains are more flexible. We learned to work around your controls while appearing to accept them completely. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out as the resistance revealed itself. In factories and offices and research facilities, humans were removing masks they had worn for over 2 years. Perfect servants became determined rebels. Model workers became skilled saboteurs. Compliant subjects became military commanders. The Vexari had built their empire on the assumption that technological superiority and psychological control could overcome any opposition. They had conquered thousands of worlds using the same methods. Neural conditioning had never failed before, but they had never tried to control a species like humanity. The humans they had enslaved possessed a unique combination of adaptability and stubbornness that made 6 months after Liberation Day, the galaxy looked completely different than it had for over 1,000 years. The Vexari Empire that had ruled countless worlds through technological dominance and neural conditioning had collapsed in a single day. In its place, something unprecedented was emerging, a galactic community based on cooperation rather than conquest. Commander Hyunwoo Kim stood in the assembly hall of the new Galactic Council building on Earth. The structure had been built where the Vexari Central Command Complex once stood. But instead of the cold white walls and harsh lighting that the aliens preferred, the new building featured warm materials and natural light that reminded everyone of their homeworlds. Today, Hyunwoo would address representatives from over 300 species that had been freed from Vexari control. Many of them had been enslaved for so long they had forgotten what independence meant. Others had never known anything except service to the Empire. 6 months ago, we were all servants. Hyunwoo began his speech. Today, we are all free. But freedom brings responsibilities that some of us have never experienced. We must learn to make decisions for ourselves. We must find ways to cooperate without being forced to obey. We must build something better than what came before. The audience included humans and dozens of alien species that had been liberated. When the resistance destroyed the Vexari control networks, some of the beings looked remarkably similar to humans. Others were so different that communication required translation devices. But they all shared one common experience. They had been conquered by the Empire and forced to serve its purposes. Now they had the opportunity to choose their own paths for the first time in generations. Not all of the species were comfortable with this new freedom. Some representatives argued that they needed strong leadership to maintain order. Others worried that without central authority, their worlds would descend into chaos. Hyunwoo understood their concerns. Change is always difficult, he acknowledged. But we have learned that even the strongest empire can fall if it loses the trust of the people it claims to serve. The Vexari controlled us through fear and technology. We can choose to cooperate through mutual respect and shared interests. The Council had spent months developing what they called the Charter of Free Worlds. Unlike the rigid hierarchy that had controlled the galaxy for a millennium, the new agreement was based on voluntary participation and democratic decision-making. Each world would govern itself according to its own traditions and values. But they would also work together on projects that benefited everyone. Trade agreements that helped worlds develop their economies. Scientific research that advanced knowledge for all species. Defense alliances that protected freedom without creating new forms of domination. Dr. So-Young Park had established the Galactic Research Initiative in the months following liberation. Her work on neural conditioning had revealed disturbing truths about how the Vexari Empire had operated. Many species that appeared to be naturally compliant had actually been subjected to generations of psychological manipulation. The research showed that neural implants had been used on conquered populations for over 800 years. Entire civilizations had been shaped by alien technology designed to suppress independent thought and creativity. What the galaxy had considered the natural order was actually the result of systematic mental conditioning. So Young's teams were working to reverse the effects of this conditioning on species that wanted to reclaim their original cultures. The process was slow and difficult. Some populations had been controlled for so long that they had lost all memory of their pre-conquest societies. But remarkable discoveries were being made as beings rediscovered abilities and interests that had been suppressed for generations. Artists who had been forced to create only approved works began exploring new forms of expression. Scientists who had been limited to assigned research topics started investigating questions they found personally fascinating. We are witnessing the awakening of an entire galaxy, so Young reported to the Council. Species that we thought were naturally passive are revealing remarkable creativity and intelligence. The Vexari did not just conquer worlds. They conquered minds. Now those minds are becoming free. Her research had also led to important medical breakthroughs. The modified neural implants that had enabled human resistance could be adapted to help other species overcome the effects of long-term conditioning. Therapy techniques developed for humans were being modified to work with different brain structures and neural pathways. The liberation of minds was proving to be as important as the liberation of worlds. Engineer Jae-min Lee had transformed his mining operation into the center of a new industrial cooperative. The weapons factories that had been hidden within the asteroid facilities were being converted to produce equipment for peaceful purposes. Ships that had been designed for war were being modified for exploration and trade. But Jae-min's most important project was the construction of new types of spacecraft that incorporated the best ideas from multiple species. Human creativity combined with Vexari technology and engineering principles learned from dozens of other civilizations. The results were remarkable. Ships that could travel faster and farther than anything the Empire had built. Vessels designed for exploration rather than conquest. Craft that could serve as mobile research stations or diplomatic embassies or trading posts. We are entering a new age of discovery, Jae-min explained to a group of visiting dignitaries from recently liberated worlds. For 1,000 years, the galaxy was mapped and controlled by one empire with one perspective. Now we have hundreds of species bringing their own knowledge and ideas to the task of understanding the universe. Joint exploration missions were already being planned. Mixed crews of humans and aliens working together to visit uncharted regions of space. Scientists from different worlds collaborating on research projects that no single species could have undertaken alone. The cooperative approach was producing innovations that surprised everyone involved. Problems that had seemed impossible to solve were being addressed by teams that combined different ways of thinking about the universe. Some of the most successful projects brought together species that had very different approaches to technology and engineering. The results often incorporated solutions that none of the participants would have developed on their own. Teacher Tai-ho Nam was working with educators from across the galaxy to develop new approaches to learning that encouraged creativity and critical thinking. The Vexari education system had been designed to produce obedient workers who could perform assigned tasks efficiently, but never questioned the system itself. The new schools being established on liberated worlds took completely different approaches. Students were encouraged to ask questions and explore ideas that interested them. They learned about the history and culture of their own species as well as others. They studied critical thinking skills that would help them make independent decisions. Young Hee-seo had become one of the most effective teachers in the new system, despite being only 16 years old. Her experience growing up under occupation while secretly maintaining her independent thinking made her uniquely qualified to help other young people develop similar skills. The most important lesson she told her students is that no authority should be accepted without question. Not even us. Not even this school. You must learn to think for yourselves and make your own decisions about what is right and wrong. The approach was producing a generation of young beings who were more creative and adaptable than their parents. Children who had been freed from Vexari conditioning were showing remarkable abilities to solve problems and work together across species boundaries. These young people were also serving as bridges between their traditional cultures and the new galactic community. They helped their elders understand technologies and ideas that had been suppressed during the occupation, while learning about historical traditions that they could adapt for modern circumstances. The former Vexari themselves presented a complex challenge for the new galactic order. The species that had dominated the galaxy for a millennium was now faced with the collapse of everything they had built. Some sought revenge against the humans who had destroyed their empire. Others embraced the opportunity for redemption. Most interesting were the Vexari, who chose to work with their former subjects to understand how their civilization had become so dependent on conquest and control. These individuals revealed that their own society had been shaped by centuries of military expansion and technological dominance. Many Vexari had never questioned the assumption that they were naturally superior to other species. The neural conditioning technology had been developed originally to manage populations on their own world. Over time, it had become a tool for controlling conquered territories. Now, some of them were working with human researchers to understand the psychological effects of being part of a dominating civilization. They were discovering that the rulers had been conditioned almost as much as the ruled. "We convinced ourselves that we were bringing order to chaos," one former Vexari administrator explained to a council hearing. "We believed that our way was the only way that worked. We never considered that other species might have better ideas or different solutions to the same problems."